No, I don't need to. It's okay. Free for now.
You just test the microphone. Test. Say something.
Testing, testing. How did it come through?
And here.
Yeah. Good.
Great.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Just one other thing. So, do you mind just muting us?
Still distorted.
Depending on may go if it's gonna be and you cannot say no.
Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us at this launch event. Before we begin proper, may I please remind you to have your microphones on mute, if you don't mind, if you're not speaking. It's just to help in terms of the proceedings today, so we're not hearing any background noise. Thank you. Excellency David Panuelo, President of the Federated States of Micronesia, the Honorable Fiame Naomi Mataafa, Honorable Prime Minister of Samoa, Excellency Elise Tokumasu de Silva, Charge d'Affaires at Interim United States Embassy in Fiji, Kiribati, Nauru, Tonga, and Tuvalu, Dr. Stuart Minchin, Director General of the Pacific Community, Mr. Sean Callahan, USAID Deputy Mission Director to the Pacific, Your Excellencies, High Commissioners, Ambassadors, and members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of Pacific Island governments and institutions, Dr. Paolo Vivili, Deputy Director General of the Pacific Community, representatives of regional and international organizations and development partners, representatives of East-West Center, the International Foundation for Electoral Systems and Care, SDC colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Nisambula Vinaka, warm welcome to you all. Nava Level for joining us for the launch of the Promoting Just, Engaged, Civic-minded and Transparent Governance Program, Project Governance. I'm delighted to see such a large number of you joining us from across the Pacific, including Canberra and Wellington, and as far afield as Manila, Bangkok, and Washington, DC. My name is Miles Young, and I'll be moderating this launch event. As is the usual practice in the Pacific, we'll commence our program with a prayer. And I'd like to invite my colleague, Dr. Mema Mutsanga, to lead us. Dr. Mema, please.
Haftai tele Miles. Ai o tele iu tufia, mataiva le vaingangana o le tuia ana. O te whae tete nei o ngā ngase inu au sala. Ai o tele ila asia fo i le vau sa i le tui whi ai. Le vau sa o le tui whi ai, nai malai ola. E mua ono tapu i le tapu tūpō, matoto le taamu te vali. Awa o le lingo le whangatia. Ma o mamanu ta wee le ni awa uli po le tae au na liunga lua. O te whaatulo watu. Te whaatulo i ele o subavou o lo tautala i lunga. O te whaatulo fo i nei whisilingia lo utulai. Ula vinaka and greetings to all our distinguished guests and all of you from our moana joining us virtually this afternoon. When asked last minute to offer some reflection and a prayer in my language to officiate the launch of the project governance, obviously I had asked questions, but then I remembered a story of a young lady by the name of V. Laufanua of Safuni Savai. She visited the Savalio Filemu, anchored at the shores, and then she asked the crew, "What is this ship?" They replied, "A prayer ship." V responded, "Oh, great. So let me pray for you all." Then she prayed the first prayer. Any Western Gospel carriers prayed for Samoans. Our ladies or our Tamaitai Samoa are Osi Taulanga or priestess. And on that thought, I respected the call for me as the Tamaitai Samoa, Osi Taulanga, to share some reflections. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27 reads, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them." Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, I read, "And the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it." And I want to stress the word keep here. Keep here refers to governance, and it takes us back to the beginning, the story of our creation. If you have some free time, I urge you to read Genesis chapters 1 and 2. The two chapters discusses two different stories of creation. Chapter 1 speaks to the equality creation, where man and woman were created equally. Their purpose is to keep and govern according to the principles of God. Chapter 2 and verse 7 talks to the creation of man, then woman, but interestingly, they were designed for the same purpose. Like the first story of creation in chapter 1, is to keep according to the principles outlined. I believe that this is the story that is widely shared, known, and used, to an extent misunderstood or misinterpreted. Keep or governance, as it is written here, in my view, speaks to the principles of love, mutual understanding, honesty, peace, collaboration, respect, and others. It is a reminder for us to revisit our beginnings, our story of creation, who we are, and our purpose. It is an opportunity for us to remember our values and acknowledge where we come from. I couldn't find anywhere in the scripture that talks to keep or governance as pule or authority. Where I believe is the root of all misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and negative connotations of the word keep or governance in today's world. As we are gathered here today to launch Project Governance, I want us all to take a step back and reflect, review. If we have to relearn, we are to ensure that we have the courage to humble ourselves, to relearn, so we are able to correct and enjoy effective, efficient, and sustainable fruits of our governance. I ask you all to join me as I pray the Samoan prayer of creation. Te o tātou te talo. O le whana awhio whaamalama mo lau awhio le atua. Ua se atua ma lau awhio lo mātou wanga māsesei. Ia tai e sea I nuu le aina atua folau. La tau te au mai mamala. Ia o ofu I mātou I le lau tele o loa lofa. Ia apele pelea I mātou I loa ngalelei. This is a 5 votive for you, our God. May you wrap us, clothe us in your goodness. Amen. Thank you all.
Now I remember for that very thoughtful reflection and prayer in the Christian tradition. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States government, through its Agency for International Development, USAID, is today officially launching Project Governance. This is a 5-year, $20 million program to promote human rights and good governance across 12 Pacific Island countries, the Federated States of Micronesia, Fiji, Kiribati, Palau, Republic of the Marshall Islands, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, Tonga, Nauru, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. The program is being implemented by the Pacific Community SDC in partnership with the East-West Center, the International Foundation for Electoral Systems and Care, and with the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat sitting on the program steering committee. One of the key aspects of the program is to promote inclusive governance, which means promoting leadership which reflects our societies and communities, as well as inclusive decision-making processes and inclusive decisions. The program also explores and highlights the alignment and complementarity between traditional or customary and modern systems of governance, And with that in mind, I'm now pleased to invite the first keynote address by the Honorable Prime Minister of Samoa, Prime Minister Fiame Naomi Matafa. And if I could please invite Covenant to pay the keynote address.
Thank you, Miles. Your Excellency President David Panuelo of the Federated States of Micronesia, Mr. Sean Callahan, USAID Deputy, Mission Director to the Pacific, Your Excellency Ms. Elise Tokumasu de Silva, Acting Charge d'Affaires, United States Embassy in Fiji, Dr. Stuart Minchin, the Director General of SBC, and distinguished delegates. It's a privilege and pleasure to provide the keynote address for today's event to launch Project Governance, a 5-year regional good governance initiative funded by the US government. The Pacific community, in collaboration with the East-West Center, the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, and Care Australia, will lead implementation. I am advised that project governance is anchored in both the 2000 Biketawa Declaration and the 2018 Boe Declaration on Regional Security, and that it is designed to strengthen existing good governance frameworks in the Pacific by promoting sound, just, and responsive governance, including through the transparency of governance institutions and effectiveness of accountability mechanisms. I welcome the timeliness of this program in our collective efforts to fulfill our commitments to the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, the framework for Pacific regionalism, the Samoa Pathway, as well as the Paris Agreement, amongst many other regional and global commitments. I would also venture to add that our governments and the Blue Pacific region are also not unfamiliar with these concepts. In fact, and as some of you may recall, Pacific Island Forum leaders accepted in 2003, by way of a Forum Principles of Good Leadership, the challenge to improve and provide effective national leadership, in particular one of high accountability in all aspects of public life. The 2003 Forum Principles of Good Leadership comprise 9 principles with respect for the law and system of government, respect for human rights, and respect for office being high among them. Additionally, and recognizing the links of good governance to economic growth and sustainable development, many of our Pacific Island countries today are members of the UN Convention Against Corruption. Our Blue Pacific region is in a continuous state of change and progression, in large part driven by our desire and aspirations to live a good quality of life. But we face numerous shared challenges, from managing and mitigating the effects of climate change, to sustainably managing our oceans and fisheries resources, and accelerated loss of biodiversity, to now guarding against the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic and its debilitating socio-economic impacts. It would seem, therefore, that many of our Pacific Island countries' economic development would remain tenuous and fragile across the region, with continuing high dependence on development assistance and delivery of basic services. Added to this is the unprecedented interest by a wide range of external actors in our region, resulting in a crowded and complex geopolitical Blue Pacific landscape. Against this backdrop, project governance presents a further opportunity for our member governments, respectively and collectively, as the Blue Pacific region, to reassess our positions. Key to the success of this program is respect for all human rights and fundamental freedoms, democratic principles, good governance, and the rule of law. These are indispensable elements already inherently recognized in the constitutions and laws of our countries, in the declarations and statements of our Pacific leaders, in the agreements, visions, and values of our regional organizations, in our national budgets and development strategies, and in the everyday conduct of our relations with all Pacific Island countries, our development partners, and international organizations. As well, these elements are fundamental for the achievement of the program objectives of project governance, to mention a few: where public sector transparency and accountability is increased, where elections and political processes are competitive, accessible, and conducted with integrity, where an active, educated, and inclusive civil society is empowered, and where civic education for our Pacific youth is bolstered. These, in turn, can support our continued collective efforts to improve human development, sustainably grow our economy and reduce poverty, improve gender equality, and enhance good governance, as well as political and social conditions for stability and safety. I expect that many questions will be asked as the program gets underway, one of which could be, what can we expect from this program that we have not already tried? There are no simple answers to such a question, as we know too well the constraints and challenges that we face in the implementation of work nationally and regionally. Many accounts of past work have established that the difficulties are real and that the results should serve to inform us of the circumstances and prevailing conditions in our respective countries. Governance and good governance hold different meaning to different people and governments. And this is particularly true in the case of our Pacific Island countries, with our strong and vibrant cultures and traditions. I am hopeful that project governance will enable a better tailoring of approaches to suit the particular circumstances of our countries, noting also our continued struggle with compliance and reporting obligations. Importantly, I would encourage us to continue to explore the possible harmonization of traditional and present-day governance structures to not only benefit our Pacific peoples, but to support our traditional leaders in formal policy making. Our Blue Pacific region is relatively stable, notwithstanding our young democracies and varying good governance and human rights records. While the roles and functions of key institutions in our countries and our Blue Pacific region are functioning well, further efforts must be made to support and strengthen them to ensure that we continue to uphold the principles of good governance. In particular, integrity and oversight bodies must be empowered with resources and authority to effectively do their work. The events that unfolded following our general elections this past April created what many called a constitutional crisis. The passage of time from elections to today has been very difficult, and it will be recorded in the annals of Samoa's history as a journey of a mature democracy, which nonetheless served to divide and test the key pillars of our society: our faith, our culture, and the rule of law. However, less than a week ago, the Samoa Parliament passed the national budget, the first for my government. And 2 days ago, I delivered my first statement as the first female Prime Minister of Samoa at the general debate of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. That we were able to achieve these, notwithstanding the challenges we face as a country and people, is testament to Samoa's continued strong belief in the rule of law, democratic principles, good governance, and the protection of the rights of our people. Excellencies, there is much one could say on the value of traditional and contemporary governance, the rule of law, and accountable decision-making. But time is of the essence. Allow me to convey my government's appreciation and gratitude to the government of the United States and the SPC for its invaluable support and assistance, and I look forward to the successful implementation of this program. Thank you.
Tailawa, Honourable Prime Minister, for reminding us that project governance is grounded in the Keynote Declaration and the Boy Declaration, which forum leaders have endorsed, and also the linkages between governance, human rights, and sustainable development. And finally, congratulations on your historic achievement as the first female Prime Minister of Samoa. Now pleased to invite His Excellency, the President of the Federated States of Micronesia, President David Panuelo, who joins us from Pohnpei in the Federated States of Micronesia to deliver his keynote address. Your Excellency.
Good morning to all of you from our capital, Palikir, Pohnpei, Federated States of Micronesia. I want to begin my brief statement by first extending my courtesies and respects first to the Honorable Fiame Naomi Matahapa, Prime Minister of Samoa, to Her Excellency Elise Takamashu De Silva, Charge Affairs of the U.S. Embassy to Fiji, Kiribati, Nauru, Tonga, and Tuvalu, to Dr. Stuart Minchin, Director General of SPC, Dr. Paula Fifili, Deputy Director General of SPC, Sean Callahan, USAID Deputy Mission Director to the Pacific, Miles Young, Director of Human Rights and Sustainable Development, SPC, and others that I don't notice in this program. Kaselele and warm greetings from our beautiful islands in the Federated States of Micronesia. I want to begin by first thanking the Honorable Prime Minister of Samoa, my dear friend Naomi, for her powerful statement. I want to thank her for that, the wisdom and the issues she's touched, including the instruments for accountability, for leadership and transparency in the Pacific. I would like to begin my comments with a snapshot of recent history. Back in 2019, on the 15th of July, I received Ms. Laura Studensky, the SPC Regional Director for Micronesia, and Mr. Miles Young, the Director of SPC's Regional Rights Resource Team, in a courtesy call in my office here in Palikir. Among the items we talked about, we discussed how human rights issues are increasingly being seen as a development issue, both in the FSM and in the Pacific at large. Gender equality, for example, is a development issue, and violence against women is a development issue because there are tangible and measurable associated costs associated with these issues. I solicited support from Lara and Miles and asked them for their help in providing information, ideas, programs, and activities in order to improve the FSM national government in being just, engaged, civic-minded, and transparent. As it happens, back in 2019, on the 21st of November, I received in my office Mr. Sean Callahan, the Deputy Mission Director for the Pacific Islands at the USAID office. We discussed the importance of promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific from the lens of democracy and democratic principles and good governance. Today, we celebrate the official launch of the Promoting Just, Engaged, Civic-minded, and Transparent Project Governance Program, funded by our friends at USAID, implemented by our friends at SPC, and with additional support from our friends at East-West Center and other like-minded organizations. I am completely confident that project governance will provide objective and impartial guidance and advice. To be clear, I am also soliciting objective and impartial guidance and advice from project governance on both the FSM's governance historically and currently. Over the course of our administration here, Vice President George and I have attempted to demonstrate justice by emphasizing the rule of law and by expanding partnerships. We have just applied membership in the International Police Organization, Interpol, and expect for full membership in November. And we have expanded our Department of Justice. Our Division of Anti-Human Trafficking is now 2 years old. And just weeks ago, we created the Cybersecurity and Intelligence Bureau. We have attempted to be engaged, civic-minded, and transparent too. Aside from our press releases and interviews with both media and citizens, just last week, I submitted to our 22nd FSM Congress the FSM Freedom of Information Act. Our Freedom of Information Act, if passed by the FSM Congress, would explicitly state that FSM citizens have the right to information from their government and also provide the means and mechanisms for citizens to access that information. I have often said that a better world is not something we ask for, but rather that a better world is something we build, like we are doing today collectively. The Federated States of Micronesia wants to be best example in the world of a just, engaged, civic-minded, and transparent government. I, in my capacity as president of the FSM, wish to express my thanks to USAID and our other partners for their support to project governance and to again solicit as much assistance as possible from our partners at SPC as we seek to implement this program. So today I join the Prime Minister of Samoa in thanking all of you for our collective efforts, and I look forward to engaging and our governments engaging with our institutions in the Pacific who are promoting this project for a very productive and successful outcome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at this important program. Thank you again, and greetings from Micronesia.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your keynote address and also for the reminder of the courtesy call in August 2019 when I think you had just recently been elected and committed yourself to good governance and the rule of law, I remember from our conversation. And also for your commitment for the FSM to be, in your words, best example in the world in terms of just civic-minded and transparent governance. So good night, Dan. Our next speaker is USAID Acting Mission Director for Pacific, Sean Callahan, who joins us from Manila to deliver some remarks. And following his remarks, he will introduce Her Excellency Elise Socomas da Silva, who will then launch project governance. Good night, Sean.
Bula Vanaka, thank you very much, Miles. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'd like to first acknowledge and pay my respects to President David Puanello of the Federated States of Micronesia. And also thank you very much for acknowledging our meeting where we discussed governance so long ago, but I'm glad to see that we're here today. I also like to pay my respects and acknowledge Prime Minister Fame Matafa of Samoa, and also to congratulate her on her historic speech at UNGA, as well as acknowledge our acting charge, Elisa Tokumasu da Silva of our American Embassy in Suva, and our Secretary General of the Pacific Community, Dr. Stuart Minchin, partners, colleagues, friends from the United States, other embassies to support the Pacific Island countries. Good morning and good afternoon. I'm honored to represent the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID. USAID is the lead US government agency that works to end global poverty and enable democratic, resilient societies to realize their potential. This year, USAID is proud to celebrate 60 years of helping people around the world build stronger, more prosperous communities. USAID was founded in 1961 by President John F. Kennedy. Today, USAID works in more than 100 countries worldwide, but our partner countries here in the Pacific Islands, including Fiji, remain key allies in promoting sustainable and inclusive development in line with our friends and our vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. We are very pleased to formally launch today the partnership between USAID and the Pacific community to implement the Promoting Just, Engaged, Civic-minded, and Transparent Governance, or Project Governance activity. For the next 5 years, Project Governance will work to achieve sound, just, and responsive governance by working towards changing long-standing incentives that impede government transparency, creating relationships of mutual accountability, strengthening a culture and practice of integrity, promotion, and corruption prevention, removing opportunities to manipulate electoral processes, and impeding citizen engagement, addressing a culture of impunity, working with people throughout society on the role that the government should play and must play, and ensuring media can foster transparency and accountability. Sound governance entails countering corruption by increasing transparency and accountability, promoting responsible and sustainable financial practices, and strengthening the role of watchdog organizations that demand accountability from the government. The growing presence and influence of undemocratic forces expose many countries to non-transparent and unaccountable commercial activities, which undermine local markets and hamper legitimate investments. Just governance takes place within the context of a democratic political system that is representative of the will and interests of the people, where everyone, including the state itself, is accountable to laws that are passed openly by freely elected representatives, enforced fairly and adjudicated independently. Responsive governance is present when government institutions and policies are accessible, accountable, and responsive to their constituents, especially disadvantaged groups. These government institutions protect their interests and provide diverse populations with equal opportunities for public services such as health, justice, education, and a secure environment. Given how interconnected our world has become, I'm very happy that USAID is in a position to support SPC's work to promote good governance practices and support its wide-scale application throughout the Pacific. I'm also happy to see the strong partnership the SPC has forged through the Blue Pacific Alliance, which also includes the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, known as IFES, the East-West Center, and CARE USA. We are looking forward to partnering with you in the next 5 years. And in closing, allow me to introduce our acting Chargé d'Affaires of the United States Embassy in Suva, Fiji, who will deliver a statement on behalf of the United States government. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Chargé d'Affaires and Elise Tugumasu de Silva. Thank you.
Honorable Fiame Naomi Mataafa, Prime Minister of Samoa, His Excellency David W. Panuelo, President of the Federated States of Micronesia, Mr. Sean Callahan, Acting Mission Director, USAID, Philippines, Pacific Islands, and Mongolia, and representatives and dignitaries of the Pacific Island countries and embassies. Friends and esteemed colleagues, I'm honored to join you all today for the launch of a new partnership between the United States Agency for International Development and the Pacific community to strengthen sound, just, and responsive governance in the Pacific region. President Biden recently said that the challenge of our time is to demonstrate that democracies can deliver by improving the lives of their own people while addressing the greatest problems facing the world. As strong partners and enduring allies, we must learn to adapt and better respond to climate and disaster impacts, pandemics, and economic shocks, with strong political systems that champion democratic values, human rights, equity, and inclusion. Together, we want to support the empowerment of women, youth, and the LGBTQ community to be fully engaged, inclusive, and well-informed. We want to encourage efforts that support democratic governance by encouraging free and fair election processes that respect human rights. And we believe in the importance of respecting and acknowledging the media as stewards of transparency and accountability. To advance these beliefs, the US government, through the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, and with support from SPC, is proud to launch the 20 million Project Governance, promoting just, engaged, civic-minded, and transparent governance in the Pacific. Working with SPC and key stakeholders in the region, we will help promote the integrity of electoral processes, support the independence of media and information integrity, and protect human rights, including civil and political rights. We will also support activities that foster accountability and transparency, strengthen the rule of law, and empower civil society organizations to play a more active role in promoting good governance. As President Biden stated during the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, democracy remains the best tool we all have to unleash our full human potential. The United States remains a committed partner to each of the Pacific Islands in building a more honest, just, and democratic world that advances our shared vision of a resilient, free, and open Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much for your partnership.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that inspiring speech and for launching Project Governance. and for reminding us of the United States as an ally of the region. And also that the media are stewards of accountability and transparency. So thank you for those words. If I could also add my best wishes for the program in my family. I now would like to call on and introduce the Director General of Pacific Community, Dr. Stuart Minchin, to deliver his remarks. Director General.
Thank you, Miles. Excellencies, partners, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, SPC is really delighted to be the lead implementing agency for project governance, which is designed to support SPC members in realising the 2000 Bikatawa Declaration. The Bikatawa Declaration committed the Pacific to good governance, to belief in the liberty of the individual under the law, to democratic processes and institutions, equitable economic, social and cultural development, to respecting and protecting Indigenous rights and cultural values, traditions and customs. It recognised the vulnerability of forum members to threats to their security and to the importance of cooperation amongst members in dealing with such threats. It also recognised the importance of averting the causes of conflict by peaceful means, including using customary practices. So in order to best serve our members in this endeavour, SPC has formed an alliance of implementing partners, the Blue Pacific Alliance, consisting of CARE International, the East-West Centre and the International Foundation of Electoral Systems. Our alliance brings decades of regional experience in strengthening civic participation, the empowerment of women, enabling meaningful community participation and building accountable and transparent systems and governance frameworks. Alongside SPC, one of the region's most foremost technical support agencies, these partners collectively stand well placed to supporting our members institute democratic, sustainable governance reforms. SPC would like to acknowledge the Government of the United States through its Agency for International Development, USAID, for initiating this program of work, which could not have come at a more critical time for the region. In recent times, the Pacific has faced some of its toughest tests in relation to good governance, sustainable development and human rights. For example, in relation to electoral processes, legislative changes and freedom of expression, which have occurred amidst the complex and fluid COVID-19 situation, which continues to devastate societies and economies and disproportionately impact already marginalised communities. These examples demonstrate the need for us to hold a mirror to ourselves and ask whether we are truly following the Pacific Way, and also whether there may be opportunities to strengthen our existing approach in light of recent pressures. Project governance, therefore, has an important role to play at what is a critical moment in the Pacific's history. It can serve as a catalyst and a driving force for our members to come together once more to address some of the biggest challenges in living memory in the way we know best, through the utilisation of traditional knowledge, the development of consensus, and with respect, honour and pride. To this end, we will be applying SPC's people-centred approach through project governance. This brings together traditional development methodologies of human rights-based approach with gender equality, social inclusion, and marries them with a Pacific cultural lens and a focus on environmental sustainability. For as Pacific Islanders, it's essential for us to consider our culture and our lands when understanding any form of development in order to ensure that what we do and what we achieve is contextualised to meet the specific needs of our diverse and rich communities. The people-centred approach will therefore mean that communities that project governance is intended to benefit play a meaningful role throughout the program, from designing the activities all the way through to defining what our measures of success should be. The result of this will be a program that is designed by the Pacific and for the Pacific in its time of need. A program whose outcomes will live beyond the 5 years of the project and continue to support the commitments of the region, not only the Bikatawa Declaration and the Boe Declaration, but also the Framework for Pacific Regionalism, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Samoa Pathway, Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration, and the Pacific Framework for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In conclusion, I therefore invite everyone participating and listening in today to take an active role in project governance. If you are one of our members, speak to us to see how this program can support your national and regional priorities. If you're a development partner, get in touch and see how we can collaborate on this. Or if you're a member of any of our Pacific communities and have ideas on how Pacific governance can be shaped for a better future, we would like to hear from you. Thank you. Back to you, Miles.
That it is essential for us through project governance to consider our culture, our lands, when undertaking any form of development, to ensure that what we do and achieve is contextualized to meet the specific needs of our communities. At this point, we're going to show a very short video which reflects on culture and Pacific ways of knowing, doing, and governance. So if I could invite Kalpana to play the video. Kalpana.
There's always been our Pacific sort of traditional leadership and governance structures in place and interacting with these global governance agenda for as long as we have existed and for as long as colonialism and development has been in our region. So I think there is opportunity to keep learning from us as a Pacific people, and also there is opportunity for us to exchange knowledge within our region, so across the islands, but also for those who work in the development, especially a Western-centric development, to really learn carefully from our ideas about issues like governance and sustainability and other things which we have been practicing for many, many years, well before colonization. I certainly think from where I come from, Papua New Guinea, there's the opportunity to incorporate mediation more is there. And I think this is also relevant for the rest of the Pacific, because this is the ways in which our ancestors and which we continue to do also to solve issues within our community, to speak about things to Talanoa. So I think mediation and its connections to the formal justice system, and it is being done within our countries in the region, but I think there's an opportunity to strengthen that kind of local initiative, whatever it is in the region, around mediation and how we can better strengthen our justice systems to address some of our social issues in our communities. My area of expertise is around law and justice. I think what we as a region have contributed to the world in terms of global governance is this issue of restorative justice. So coming back to what I was talking about, Talanoa and mediation and restorative justice is a whole practice in itself. And while it has some challenges, especially when it comes to sensitive and very difficult issues like gender-based violence, which is a huge problem in our region, I think there are opportunities for us to look back into the ways in which we traditionally dealt with issues around gender and gender-based violence, and then work at ensuring that those practices where good are kept and continue, but also for us to ensure that those practices are in line with some of these global governance or global agendas around addressing issues around addressing violence against women and girls. But from our region, I think that's something that we should be proud of, and we should be contributing more around the around restorative justice.
Glad to be there with you and I. So we've now come to the final part of our program, the vote of thanks and concluding remarks to be delivered by Deputy Director General of the Civic Community, Dr. Paula Gavili. But before we do that, I've been asked to invite you all to please turn on your cameras so that we may take some photos to capture this launch event. And once this is done, we'll invite Dr. Gavili to deliver the vote of thanks. So if you could please turn your cameras on, and the people that are working the cameras will take some photos. If you bear with us for another, say, 2 to 3 minutes while we do that. Bimaka. Good night, everyone. I see that we have around 95, 96 people online, so that's a very good turnout. So thank you very much for your patience and for your joining us today. So now, as I said, the final part of our program, and I'd like to invite Dr. Paula to deliver the vote of thanks. Paula.
Thank you, Miles. His Excellency David Penduelo, President of the Federated States of Micronesia, the Honorable Fiame Naomi Mataafa, Prime Minister of Samoa, Your Excellency Mr. Luis Tokumas da Silva, Acting Charge at the United States Embassy to Fiji, Kiribati, Nauru, Tonga, and Tuvalu, Mr. Sean Callahan, USAID Deputy Mission Director of the Pacific, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Pacific community, it's a privilege for me to deliver the vote of thanks at this launch of a pivotal project, signifying to the region and the world yet another partnership in development between the Pacific, the United States government through USAID. I'd like to first express our deepest gratitude to His Excellency David Penduelo, President of FSM, and the Honorable Fiame Naomi Mataafa, Samoa's Prime Minister, for gracing this event and delivering two inspiring keynote addresses. Your respective passions for good governance are evident from your thought-provoking interventions, and certainly is advocacy for good governance at the highest level of the region. On the same note, I'd like to express our heartfelt appreciation for the government of the United States for this regional initiative in promoting just, engaged, civic-minded, and transparent governance, which couldn't come at a more critical time for the region. I'm particularly grateful to Your Excellency, Mr. Luis Tokumas da Silva, for honoring the occasion in person here at SPC. Incidentally, this is the first time we've got a face-to-face meeting here since the lockdown here. Yes. And it's probably appropriate that we start off our discussions with a project on governance, given post-COVID-19 buildback. It is important to address this very important issue. I also want to thank the USAID for trusting the Pacific community to be the leading implementing agency for this historic project. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Callahan and his USAID team for the collaborations to date, both with the staff in Suva and in Manila. And they have developed good relationships with our team here at SPC. This undoubtedly augurs well for the implementation and overall success and impact of the project governance. The impact we're aiming to achieve will not be possible without SPC's implementing partners for project governance, East West Center, International Foundation for Electoral Systems, and CARE International. Together, as you've heard, we have formed the Blue Civic Alliance, and we owe a sincere Minakawa Alevo to these partners for joining us and look forward to taking this journey together. The partnership between the USAID and Blue Civic Alliance will create a domino effect across the region, having a far-reaching impact on the lives of the Pacific people by strengthening the foundations of good governance through mutually reinforcing initiatives and with deep cultural understanding. I also convey our heartfelt gratitude to our regional and international development partners, donors, and friends who have joined us remotely for this launch. We acknowledge your participation and commitment. It's a testament to our collective stand for peaceful, secure, and prosperous Pacific through effective development cooperation and multi-sectoral engagement. Last but not least, our appreciation goes out to the Pacific Island countries and territories, the targeted beneficiaries of the project. We acknowledge your contributions during the preliminary stakeholder consultation, and we look forward to taking this journey with you as we implement this project. We are indeed very grateful to all of you and are very happy to be the implementers of this project. Thank you very much.
Aloha Pito, Dr. Paula. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this launch event program. Again, thank you all for gracing us with your presence, for staying throughout the program. I see that we have actually did it within the hour, which we had promised. So congratulations all. And we look forward to working with you all in implementing project governance. As we close, we have a final video, a short 3-minute video. Please feel free to continue to watch that through the end. But otherwise, thank you and nabale. Thank you.
Tonga is quite well known for our matriarchal system with the whahu system. And there's nowhere written or said that our traditional governance practices are degrading for anybody, including women, youth, people with disabilities. If you look at our Tongan traditional values, they enforce value for every single person and every single life. So those values are respect, humility, and they all stand on the foundation of love that comes from our Christian beliefs. Let's say that there's a domestic violence issue. It is encouraged first by leaders within the community as well as authorities for the families to figure it out themselves. And that's not to say that they're disregarding the problem. They go in and they help facilitate a mediation between the two parties within that particular issue. And that actually goes back to our traditional ways of Talanoa, which it goes across the Pacific, but also just valuing our va. That's another Tongan tradition, Tongan value is really respecting that relationship and doing all we can to work together. Because I think, again, what we need to remember in the Pacific context, not just in Tonga, our smallest unit is the family. It isn't the individual. External methods that were suggested, and I know have been introduced to Tonga, is to have homes and facilities where women, safe houses, sorry, that's what they're called, safe houses for women to go to But essentially what the findings were these safe houses weren't actually helping the problem at all. They weren't getting to the root issue. But if you look to our traditional governance practices, they actually were helping in getting the families together to deal with it in the traditional ways there's multiple ways where that can be addressed. I feel that all these, well, not all traditional practices, but this one in particular, let's say with our values, it needs to be incorporated into the global governance system because most traditional governance practices really reflect on our actual needs, and our laws and policies and current governance practices don't exactly do that. And I think bringing in our traditional would bridge that gap that the current laws and policies have.
Thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you.